Hello, and welcome to the Burn After Listening podcast. This is episode 5, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about death, loss, and grief. Not the most fab topic or the most uplifting topic, but it's something that has been a bit of a theme in my life, and I know how lonely it can be when you're going through any type of grief. So, this is for people who are just curious, or people who are going through loss in some way. Before I go on, I would like to apologize again for the sort of amateur editing of this podcast. I am horrible at editing, and I've noticed that I get kind of overwhelmed by wanting to make things perfect to the point where I just don't do it. So I just try and get what I'm saying out there without too much editing. So yeah, sorry about the kind of amateuriness of this, but I hope you can kind of experience it kind of like a conversation. I'd also like a quick mention to how I've been trying to work around my own mental health needs. So today I went out to my garden and I just sat there for a while with my morning coffee, and it was genuinely a really, really nice experience. So if you have a way to get outside first thing when you wake up and just sit there with doing your morning routine, couldn't recommend it more. So, I've experienced loss and death and grief in a variety of ways. I would say I've lost a lot of people to death by my age. Like, I'm only 28, but I have experienced about 5 or 6 deaths already. And so I'm very familiar with the concept. When I was 18, I actually lost my boyfriend to suicide. And of course, that was deeply traumatic. And the grief is not something that I can really put into words. But this is the thing about losing people to death or losing, pets to death is there is so much around how you perceive it. My boyfriend who passed away had said that he felt that there was nothing on the other side and that, once you die, you die. And I always thought that was quite a sad way of seeing death, because at the end of the day, it's all theoretical, right? Um, and I do have some belief around the reincarnation of energy and the spirit. I don't think that when our earthly self dies, that everything goes. I don't think that personally. I think everyone has a slightly different view on what might come after. But there is a sort of certainty in death. It's that's the finality of it. And this kind of brings me on to my next point of how loss and grief can take so many different forms. And sometimes there is actually some grief and loss that I've experienced that cause me more pain because there's no finality to it. But I am getting ahead of myself. I'll get onto that a little bit later. So, going back to my personal context, and I'll probably put a trigger warning. I probably should have earlier, sorry. Um, I'll put a trigger warning here because I'm kind of going to start going a bit into detail about the deaths I've experienced. So feel free to skip ahead if this isn't something that you feel you can hear right now. Please be mindful of that too. So, I think the first death that I ever experienced was when I was very young, and it was my Indian grandfather. Apparently, we were very close when I was little, but I have very few memories of that. But I do remember um, I have a few sort of images in my memory of his funeral. So, but that was very young, and I think I still was trying to grasp the concept of death. So I don't know if how much that consciously impacted me, but I'm sure, as per everything, it probably impacted me subconsciously. Around that same age, my parents separated, and that was a form of loss that was slightly different to death. And again, I'll go on to that later, but there is that sense of grief and loss. And I must have been about 5 or 6 years old. After a few years, my mum met someone new, and he sort of took up the role of a paternal figure for a while. And unfortunately, he committed suicide after a few years. And again, that was a huge loss. For me, I think there was that sort of paternal theme of loss already happening, but I think on the larger scale, it was witnessing the loss in terms of seeing my family, feeling that sadness and that sorrow, also trying to process it. I think at this point I was around 10. So again, still quite young, still struggling to comprehend it. And I only found out way later, like years later, that it was actually suicide as well. So um, that was obviously like another layer of that grief many years later. So again, life was sort of in disarray at that point. Another funeral, another huge blow to our family and our family unit. A few years went by, and there were some losses, but in terms of how close they were to me, they were sort of like acquaintances to me, but distant family members, things like that. Um, and members of my family that I didn't know very well. It's not to say that I didn't feel their loss. I think when it was compared to my base understanding of it, which was what I've already referenced, it sort of didn't it didn't break through the thick skin of it all. Plus, around that time, I had hit puberty. I was a teenager, and I think we all know that when you're a teenager, you really don't think about anyone but yourself. Um, so no offense to any teenagers listening. It's not your fault. It's just the way your brain is wired right now. And then flash forward to me being 18, and that was when my boyfriend at the time committed suicide. I actually later found out, like a year or two later, that a guy I'd sort of briefly dated while I was in uni, and when I say dated, I mean like we probably went on like 3 or 4 dates. I actually found out that he'd commit suicide as well, and it was just a lot at once. Obviously, I won't go into too detail about what happened with them, but um, the the blow after blow on me was not something I was able to tolerate, and it kind of triggered a huge mental breakdown, which actually allowed me to get the treatment I needed and the diagnoses I needed to get the correct treatment. So, I don't think it was a bad thing that that happened, but obviously, like I said, I wouldn't wish those emotions or those feelings on anyone. Um, they are truly something that you can't fully grasp until you're in it. But my reactions to all of these uh, deaths, or the news of these deaths, was vastly different because the context was very much important, So when I found out that my boyfriend had died, I was absolutely heartbroken. I couldn't get up off the floor. I was wailing. Even if I think back to it now, it's very visceral. I could fall into that again. Um, and then when I found out that my mum's partner when I was younger had passed away, I was just sort of in shock, and I was very aware of everyone around me and wanting to make sure everyone around me was okay. So there were again such vastly different experiences. And then over the course of a few years after that, um, my on my Indian side, my grandmother passed away and my aunt passed away. So, and actually my aunt-in-law passed away. So we had a lot of grief on that side, but it's very complicated. I've been quite estranged from that side of my family. So again, there was a sense of disconnect from it, but I was very close with my aunt, and it really, really did. Um, it was really upsetting. Obviously, all of it was, but if that kind of makes sense, I hate to put it in sort of terms of importance because it's not like that for me. It's more how much they impacted me from the context, as I mentioned earlier. So, death itself is something I'm very familiar with. And I can tell you for a fact that it is not the same. It's not something that gets easier um, because the context really matters. But what I have learned is I'm getting better and better at processing grief and also helping other people process grief as a therapist, which leads me on to my next point, how my therapeutic background, both as someone who has been in a lot of treatment, therapeutic treatment, and has also given a lot of therapeutic treatment.